Well, this will be a lot of fun. Thanks a lot to the Outlier Podcast Festival for having us. I am Tim Pilleri of Crawlspace Media. We do the Missing Maura Murray podcast. We do Crawlspace and Empty Frames, and we run the Crawlspace Media Network. My partner here is Lance. What's up, Lance?
What is going on? This is the first time you've ever introduced me and not asked me how I was, so I don't know what to say.
Start over. How are you?
I am doing better than ever. I'm so excited to be here. What a way to end the week. And we have our good friend, our partner in crime or anti-crime, Maggie Freeling is our guest for this evening. So,
hi, guys.
How's it going?
What's up?
It's going. I am exhausted, but it's going.
Long week?
Quite a long week, quite a long month, but you know.
And you just launched your brand new podcast that is really you on your own. You have been on many podcasts, including ours, but you are also a part of NPR's Latino USA podcast. But now this is your own animal. Can you tell us a little bit about this podcast?
Yeah, so I have been a producer for many years for all sorts of public radio stations, NPR included, NPR shows. But yeah, so this is my first time having my own podcast where I am the host, reporter, producer, engineer. I do everything. It's fun. It's nice to be my own boss. It's nice to do my own things.
And you got this podcast started through the Obsessed Network, and the Obsessed Network is run by the creative minds, the hilarious and really thought-provoking minds behind True Crime Obsessed and Obsessed with Disappeared. That's Patrick Hines. Can you tell us a little bit about your history with those folks, and how did that all come to be?
Oh boy. So my history with them is pretty similar to yours. Patrick is equally as obsessed with all of us. And so I guess, he saw the documentary, The Disappearance of Maura Murray on Oxygen. He covered it for his podcast because True Crime Obsessed covers in a very funny way true crime podcasts. So Patrick covered The Disappearance of Maura Murray. He saw all of us in it, and we met at CrimeCon. We both live in New York City, so it was like, oh my gosh, let's get drinks. I was working in Harlem at the time. His house is on the way back. I literally had to pass it on the train. So we got drinks and just started talking, and it just became him being like, look, I want to branch out. I want to make a network. I need to have you on my network. What do you want to do? And we ran through a few ideas, and here we are.
Well, I got to say that you being on his network and having a podcast is much better than his first idea, which was wearing your hair on his body.
Yeah, he wanted to take all. He does have a Maggie wig, though. I think and my coat. He does what he does.
It works for him. I will say.
I think he looks better than I do, honestly.
He does wear it well.
And I just want to say thank you to Josh Hallmark from True Crime Bullshit for hooking us up with this spot here with the Outlier Podcast Festival. He is a professional, consummate podcast professional. He's great. And he really kind of is sort of like us in the way where we are amateur journalists who sort of stumbled into a podcast career, which actually happens to involve a lot of journalism, which is bizarre because that, most amateurs, most people in an amateur field, you just can't really break through that professional level being an amateur. So we started our podcast, Missing Maura Murray, back in 2015, July of 2015. We've done almost 200 episodes on that case, and it's still going. The podcast led to the series, the Disappearance of Maura Murray, done by the Oxygen Network, which is when we met Maggie Freeling, which was, I believe we met her probably 2016. We all met.
I think we were filming in 2016. We met.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so really, this amateur attempt that we started back in 2015 landed us all here right now, and we're still amateurs. You're a professional. I guess one thing I'm curious about is what, as a professional journalist, what was it like hearing the Missing Maura Murray podcast at the beginning?
It must have been life-changing.
Yeah.
Well, in a sense. And I do, you know, I've been a fan of Josh and his podcast, and we haven't met or talked. So Josh, hello. Thank you for putting everyone here. I would love to talk with you about Israel Keys. So I just wanted to put that out there. But, you know, I thought it was so cool to hear your podcast. You know, I had been at that point in audio journalism. I guess I started 2014. I started in audio journalism at WHIY in Philadelphia. So I thought it was pretty cool what you guys were doing. And that was always something I wanted to do. I was like, how do I do this? How do I do this on my own? And over the years, I know I've asked you guys a lot of those questions. Like, how do I break away from public radio? How do I, you know, do my own thing and be my own boss? How do I start that? So I really admired you guys and thought that was very, very cool that you were doing that and making a living off of it. So I commend you, and that was really great.
Well, it brings us, thank you, but making a living is, I mean, we're raking it in hand over fist, first of all. But no, that brings us to the point of this conversation, which Tim kind of alluded at in the beginning of his intro there. We're not journalists. I remember back in the day when we started doing this, we said, you know, I feel weird even being called a journalist because people just assume you are a journalist if you're talking about something like a missing persons case or a cold case, and you have some air of authority about yourself. The only reason why we did is because we had researched it a lot before we actually started talking behind a microphone, and it felt awkward. It felt very very strange to talk to nobody and just know that it was being recorded onto something that would eventually go somewhere. It felt even more strange when people listened to it, and then they started calling Tim and I journalists, and we had to say, no, we're not journalists.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the topic that we want to get at, which is where is the line between what I believe you graduated from UMass Amherst in 2011. Podcasting was pretty new. You know, it was there, but it wasn't at the you know, true crime podcasting certainly wasn't.
I was doing podcasting in a journalism class, maybe it was a communications class, journalism or communications class in 2009. And we were exclusively using GarageBand, like podcasting. Yeah. I remember looking at like one time, like a timeline of like when podcasting became big, and it obviously became big with Serial, but there were clearly, you know, others around. I think it was around 2009, like This American Life might have switched to podcast, something like that. I could be totally off, but it was around that like 2009 time, this like idea of podcasting became like a thing. Yeah. And, you know, back to, you know, to your question, Tim, because you asked, and now Lance, you've asked about being a journalist versus, you know, I don't know, what would you guys call yourselves? Just podcasters, or are you citizen detectives in a sense?
Yeah, that's true. I think digital journalists, I have called myself that at times.
Yeah, I feel bad calling myself anything that I haven't earned a degree at, except U.S. Marshal, because Tim knows, and you know, that Art Roderick has bestowed upon me the honorary U.S. Marshal title. Other than that, like if you say like journalist or digital journalist, I feel like I needed to go to school for that. So that's really my question: is where is the line there?
I know that people would disagree with me, but I do think to be titled a journalist, I do think you probably, I have to say that you need to be, you know, trained in a sense. Like there are rules and there are ethics and there are things that you need to know. And, you know, I took all sorts of law and ethics classes for my master's, you know, like there are things that I just think you really need to know. And I think this is very much my personal belief, is that, you know, when we start calling people who might not have the same kind of, you know, ethics background journalists, I do think it gets confusing for folks who are digesting news and are digesting media. That's not to say you can't be, you know, as informed or knowledgeable as a journalist. I just think, you know, the title really implies something that is different than, let's say, what you guys are doing, you know, when you mention what you're doing. And yeah, so back in school, my undergrad, 2009, you know, there wasn't really such thing as like what you guys are doing. There wasn't such thing as like a podcaster that people go to seek information. It was definitely different. You know, you got the news on the radio and you read it through journalists who have sources. And I do think now it is quite blurred. I just think, I don't know, and maybe, you know, tell me what you feel, but I think giving somebody the title of like, I am a journalist really implies a high bar and a high standard. And I know, you know, your podcast is so wonderful, but what you guys do is very different from what I do. You know, I do a lot of sourcing. I do a lot of, you know, record checking, and you guys do that. But I also know that you guys, you know, it's, you're quick with information in a sense. You know, you get the information out and then you'll go back and correct yourself. And for me, I can't do that as a journalist. I would never put something out if I hadn't.
Oh, what are you saying? We play fast and loose here?
Yeah, you're giving us way too much credit.
You guys, so
we don't correct ourselves.
A wonderful thing. You guys do a wonderful thing where you take these interviews. You're not claiming to be a journalist, which when you do, like I said, you know, there are there's a really high bar put to that. So you don't claim that. You can do first person interviews and people can say things, you know, and I guess in a sense, you shouldn't obviously put out libel or slander in any way, but I think it's a little looser. You know, you can have somebody giving their first person account of things, but when someone does that with me, I still go and I fact check everything that they say before I put it out. I make sure I have documentation of what they're saying. It's definitely different, and you can yell at me all you want about that.
No, that's... do you guys watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia, right?
Yes.
I feel like a journalist the way Charlie feels like a lawyer. You know, when he calls himself a lawyer?
Bird law.
Yeah, bird law.
Yeah.
Well, in a sense, like, I guess, like, where is like, I don't know. Like, I do think for someone to call themselves a journalist, I really do think you need to be trained in that sense.
Well, the amateur, I can do it, doesn't really exist in too many professions, if you think about it. Like, you can't just call yourself an amateur dentist and sit someone down in a chair.
Yeah.
Which I've done to myself.
Right. And you can do it, but you can't do it and call yourself a professional dentist.
There's repercussions.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the point that I'm making. Like, I know that everything I do, there are repercussions for. That's what my career is based on, that I'm a journalist. So I have a lot of repercussions, but in that same sense, like, I don't think, you know, your career is necessarily at the same stake level. You know, you don't call yourself a journalist, and that's probably a good thing for you guys.
When you were in school for journalism, what were you thinking you were going to investigate? You know, like as an investigative journalist, did you want to get into it for the investigative purposes? Like, I want to go shake things up, or you know, what was because that's what you do now. Unjust and Unsolved. Your podcast is shaking things up, and it's for a good cause. Is that like what you were thinking back in the day?
Always. You know, it's funny because when Patrick and I were trying to conceive this idea, it was like he wanted to kind of do something similar to True Crime Obsessed, which was like funny. And I'm like, I'm not funny. Like, I'm very serious. I'm a very serious, like, academic journalist. I mean, I'm funny in my personal life, but like not in my work. It's that's not what I do. It's always very serious. I've never really covered anything that's light. I covered genocide and immigration and very, really fun topics. So I always thought, you know, in my head, I've always wanted to be like a Democracy Now, like Amy Goodman. Like, I've always wanted to be someone like that, just like doing on the ground, finding the truth, and really, you know, grassroots investigations and grassroots advocacy and grassroots reporting is always what I wanted to do. I really, you know, in school, I thought I was going to be kind of like an international reporter, and I always pictured myself like in Iraq. Definitely different direction.
Oh, no kidding.
But yeah.
What was the appeal of of that? Like why Iraq? You wanted to?
Well, just like kind of war report, or just like
Uh-huh.
on the ground, you know, because I just think they're, you know, at the time, things are definitely different now, but at the time I felt like we just were so sheltered from what was truly going on. And I had known, are you guys laughing at me? Are you chatting about me behind my back?
No.
I know what you guys do. No, I hate you guys so much.
What's really hard is that
You are
can't even
chatting. You
make it
are
seem like what
chatting, and
you're
I can't
talking
read
about.
it because I'm talking. You are chatting behind my back. So no, I totally lost what I was saying. Thank you guys. Thanks.
War reporting. You
Well,
saw
yeah,
yourself.
no,
Yeah.
I just okay. So I had a bunch of a couple of very good friends at the time who were in Afghanistan and were telling me very scary, top secret things. I had seen videos, you know, from cameras, and you know, it was just things I had never seen on the news, had never at the time heard reported. So I always thought like, okay, that's something I want to do. I need to cover this. This is disturbing what is happening in these countries, to civilians particularly. Um, and it just went in a different direction, because I think there are wonderful people that are doing that kind of reporting now. And I felt we needed a little more reporting here at home.
Yeah. And what would the process be to even get into something like that?
That's a great question. I did for a while consider my safety in that kind of environment. You know, there are very few things that, like, you know, as a lot of us who digest true crime and a lot of media, you know, there are very few things that I can't see or watch. But when I do hear about reporters, you know, being held hostage, it's really disturbing, and that like really freaks me out, because I think of how, you know, at least mentally close I was to being there. And so I think that really deterred me. You know, of course there's a lot of danger in what we do. I mean, speaking about the Maura Murray case, I mean, it's just anytime you're vocal about something, that there is a partisan side to, I think you do put yourself in any kind of danger.
Interesting point, because there's that old adage that says if you're not upsetting people, you're doing something wrong. Do you think that's true 100% of the time? Because you could just go and upset everybody all the time if you wanted to.
Well,
Yeah.
it depends, because I did a story. I was down in Santa Fe reporting a story about this Conquistador pageant that had been a tradition in Santa Fe for 100 years. This came out on NPR's Latino USA. And there was three sides to this story. There was the Pueblo indigenous people, who obviously a Conquistador pageant really glorifies what happened, you know, in the mass slaughter and genocide and enslavement of the Pueblo people in New Mexico and Santa Fe. There are the Hispano people, that's what they call themselves. They're descendants from Spain who have also been on this land for a very long time. As we know, the conquistadors came a very long time ago. So they really do also consider themselves quite indigenous to the land. And then there were the caballeros, who was this religious organization who ran the pageant. And so I was down there trying to be as fair to all sides when reporting this and what was happening with all of these protests. And, you know, there was a lot of conflict going on about this pageant. As you can imagine, the Pueblo people were not happy about it. And the other side said, this is our heritage. It was really a coming moment with the Confederate statue. It was all happening at the same time. And pretty much everyone was mad at me about that article, that audio piece, except the Pueblo people. Actually, they felt that was the first time their voices had been heard nationally, and they had messaged me. The activists that I had featured were really happy, but the Hispanos and the Caballeros were not happy. And I really, truly thought I gave them the fairest possible side that I could, I really went through this. Like I did like these people. I liked them and I tried to be really fair to them. And it's hard to do that when you're running a pageant about the genocide of a people. So, that was my first instance where I was like, wow, nobody was happy with me for this. And I think I did my job correctly.
Yeah, what's that feel like, I guess? Because we've definitely experienced some of that too. We never really want to rock the boat or piss people off on purpose, but sometimes facts tend to do that. What's that been like in your case for that one, especially?
I was a little bummed out about that one. A lot of times when I'm reporting, it'll be, yeah, in the government or whoever, and I don't care if they're mad at me. They're always going to be upset when you're doing your job right. But these were just average civilians, and it was a bummer. Like I really liked them, and I spent a lot of time getting to know them, and I did see their side of things in that sense, and it sucked, but I knew that everything I wrote was factual, it was accurate, and they didn't look, they thought they didn't look great in that sense, and how do you look great when you're running a pageant for 100 years about the enslavement and genocide of Native Americans? Like, it wasn't me saying that. It came out in the piece. It was a bummer. I was sad. I liked them, and I thought they were good people. So I was sad they were mad at me.
Do you hate them now?
No, they were really great people. They let me in their home. They let me follow them. I mean, that's I think the hardest part is like when people allow you into their lives and then they're mad at you. But I did my job. I reported factually. I followed them. That's the great part about audio too, is like, yes, of course you can cut things to, make someone say something differently. Again, we have a very high standard for that. When you're reporting for a place like NPR, you can't do that. So that was kind of the good thing about it. I didn't make them say anything they didn't say. I mean, they said some things that were just like, what?
Well, you
Right.
said NPR, which is going to set Tim off.
Well, I guess, have you worked on things? Shoot, I totally lost my question. Speaking of NPR, obviously you learned a lot from us and Missing More Murray and everything, but what have you learned from working at NPR?
Well, so just because it always happens, it's not you guys, but the show aired on NPR. I didn't work for NPR, but either way, I had to follow NPR rules and standards. I mean, I learned a lot. There's a lot of rules, there's a lot of checking with legal. Can you do this? Can this happen? I mean, I really think that that's, this distinct line between being a journalist and being, I guess a podcaster, citizen detective in that sense. It's like there is a high bar. Like NPR, myself, we very quickly could have gotten sued or, lost credibility, and that you never want that to happen. As a reporter whose work was being aired on NPR, I am a liability for them. So they put their trust in people. So there's a lot of trust that goes into it. And I did learn a lot. And now I take that into, between my undergrad in journalism, my master's in journalism, and having NPR rules and standards that I have to follow. I take all of that now, almost a decade into my podcast, and I abide by so much of that. I think the only thing I do not abide by is now I feel like I can be more of an advocate and more partial than before. Before, there was always this line where you're not an advocate, you're a journalist. And now I feel like I can finally, be myself in that sense where I can blend practicing journalism, but obviously I'm advocating for the wrongfully convicted.
Right. And it's like you're in charge of the reins, like you hold the reins there. And you've come from, a pretty intense background of standards. So
Well,
at the same
and to be
time,
clear, Amber Hunt from the Cincinnati Enquirer, who hosts and produces the Accused podcast, is my editor, and she does my fact checking, and she's a veteran journalist in for investigations. So besides me, I do still have a safety net as well. So everything we are putting out, is really, really vetted.
yeah, it's
That's
pretty
great.
cool. You talked about covering that that pageant that celebrates genocide, and yet we have conversations daily about the Maura Murray case, and almost daily you say, I've never seen anything like this. I think that's kind of remarkable. What were you thinking when you got into Maura's case and where it's at now?
Oh boy. I didn't think that the online stuff would be as bad as it is and has become. I never was a Redditor, a blogger, I do know a lot of journalists use that. I think I went on Reddit one time for a source. My friend and I were trying to do a story about adult circumcisions. We went on an adult circumcision page on Reddit to find a person who wanted to talk to us about it. But other than that, I had truly I did never spent time on Reddit. Yeah, it's a world that I don't like. I don't like that I got sucked into. I think it's fascinating. I think you guys having this idea of making a documentary about the characters in a specific high profile case where so much of it is based online is brilliant. I think especially today, there's so much of it that has become, it's just a world that is, and I don't know how much you guys talk to your partners about it, but I don't. I'm you don't even, it's just a whole other, I can't even begin to talk about this bizarre trolling rabbit holes.
Maggie, if you're saying that trolls and harassment and online threats and fake tips and someone using a voice changer, if you're saying that stuff is too much in a missing persons case, I don't know what to tell you. You've signed up for the wrong missing persons case.
It's wild. I truly, there are many days. I think you guys probably get the fear and loathing text where I'm why did I ever agree to do this? It didn't benefit my life in any way. I wanted to help a family, and now this is what's happening. Now I have stalkers. Now I have people threatening to kill me just because I wanted to help a family. It's really, really horrible.
Yeah.
And what's equally kind of bizarre in the whole thing is how you are invested in this, but you haven't dove in to contribute to what's happening online, right? You don't go on Twitter and go back and forth. So if we're texting, and James Renner often texts with us as well, he'll say something like, oh, this happened. And you're usually you usually comment with, oh, show me a screenshot, catch me up on this.
I have no idea what's happening. Yeah.
Right. You're still involved with Maura's disappearance, but you're not involved in that end of the of the media, the social media part of it. But it's fascinating to me that people think that you are even though you don't comment. And
how many fake accounts do you have on Twitter, Maggie?
Yeah, I couldn't even figure out how to make my own. The only reason I have a Reddit account is because it was the AMAs, the Ask Me Anything years ago. I think it was 2017. I truly have no idea. It was literally after the show.
Yeah.
And the only reason I was doing it, and I told this to Julie, Maura's sister, I said, the only reason I'm doing any kind of public engagement in this sense is to help you. People are sending me tips. I want to help you. I don't freaking care about engaging on Reddit. Are you kidding me? So the only reason I had a Reddit account was for that.
This is flying in the face of everything.
That doesn't track, Maggie. You're ready to argue back with people anytime someone says anything about you on Twitter.
I have too much going on in my life to literally spend time arguing online. Are you freaking kidding me right now? Yes. Obviously I know you are, but in general, I'm really, I have no time to be online. I don't even have time to leave my house because I'm so busy working. Like, have you listened to my ads on my podcast? They're all like, oh my God, I don't get to sleep. I don't have time for meal prep. Get this meal kit because I can't meal prep.
Yeah, I actually fast
It's my
forward.
life.
Yeah,
I
hold on. You have
fast-forward
ads?
through
How
the
did you get
ads.
ads so fast?
The amount of like literal meal prep delivery kits because I have no time. So yeah, the fact that I'm like on Reddit, but that's why I have a Reddit, and it's like so regretful. It's so regretful. All I wanted to do was help a family, and now like my life is in danger half the time.
Well, it truly is a bizarre set of circumstances. The Maura Murray case is unlike anything that anyone's ever seen. We hear that all the time. And, it's sort of unfortunate because it would be great if some of the lesser known cases had this much attention. It just so happens that this one has all of the elements that is, I guess, appealing to everybody who wants to solve a mystery. But I don't know if people want to solve a mystery or they just want to scream their theory as loud as possible. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Like, why is it like
I
that?
do think that. I think people need to feel important. Everyone wants to be seen and heard in a sense, and I think people find that outlet here, and I think it's really sad what's happened, and it's very discouraging, and of course Art and myself have left.
Art Roderick.
Art Roderick, U.S. Marshal, who was probably the best chance that case had at really solving a lot. Art did so much for that case as a U.S. Marshal with connections, and the saddest part is he's still doing things for it. Like he still is, and and he gets trolled. He obviously doesn't care, but like, it's just sad. And I think this, like, I'm so happy now to be in this new community of wrongful convictions where every single person has a common goal, and that is to help the person who is wrongfully convicted. So Jason Flom, he's on the board of directors of the Innocence Project. He has one of the only other like weekly telling a story wrongful conviction, and I knew that when I was coming out with mine. They're just very different. His are very like interview based, and he's obviously Jason Flom and has a lot of connections, and mine is more like storytelling. But I was afraid. I was like, oh my God, are we gonna have some like beef? I don't know. I don't want to have beef. I want to work together. That's how I am. Jason Flom, I'm nobody, and his people reached out immediately to my people and said, like, let's do something. This is great. Can we advertise your podcast? The more attention on wrongful convictions, the better. And I was like, oh my God, like, we're all friends. This is beautiful. Like, everyone gets along. Everyone is grateful. Everyone is thankful. Everyone has the same goal. And it's scary that it's not like that in the Maura case. Sorry guys, I'm onto a better world now.
Yeah, I'm so confused.
Can you have your people call our people and get us on something that's more spiritually fulfilling?
So let me just clarify here for a second. So you're saying in your community of wrongful convictions, unlike the Maura Murray case, people who are in this wrongful conviction community, they don't launch fake accounts on Twitter and try to further their own theories.
I don't think these people
thoughts.
would even understand what you're speaking about. I truly, because it's serious. And that's the saddest part, is so much of Maura's case has become a joke. Like, in the saddest way. Like, everything is so serious. Like, we have a wrongful conviction my podcast group now. We have a podcast group, and I know Jason Flom has a podcast group, and it's just people sharing petitions and people being like, in my group, I make sure to say like, hey, this person's wife, this person's husband, they're here to answer questions. Like, it is so serious. It's all very serious and productive. And to think about how many like trash talking Facebook groups there are for Maura, and trolls, and it's just like, it's really sad.
Oh man, maybe you should come back into the Maura Murray community and like shake things up like the sheriff's back in town. And
yeah, we need that attitude. It's sorely missing.
No, they don't want me in that community. I'm done. I am where I'm wanted.
I'd rather talk to people in Rikers Island.
Yeah, I would. Honestly, I would rather talk to people who,
Yeah.
want me to help them, who seek me out. To say that, the amount of people who do. And there were people reaching out to me to do things on Mora's case. And I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not doing this.
Yeah. Well, it's
So
interesting.
this is the official retirement announcement from Maggie Freeling on the Maura Murray case.
Anytime Julie asks me to do something, I will do it. And that's why I did it at the beginning. And it doesn't seem like I need to or have to or am wanted to. I don't engage in the drama. I don't want anything to do with that. So, that's it. And the same with Art. But like I said, Art does it because he has a heart. Even though he was told he didn't do enough by Fred Murray. So,
Jeez.
Yikes.
It's too much. It's too much. Well, your podcast is Unjust and Unsolved. And you speak with the wrongfully convicted. How do you know that they are wrongfully convicted?
Yeah. So that's a great.
Can I guess? Can I guess?
Yeah.
They contacted you and they're in prison and they said, "Hey, I'm wrongfully convicted. Put me on your show." And you're like, "Sure, let's have a phone call right now. I'll put it up tomorrow."
Exactly.
You got Zoom?
Exactly. Well, something close to that, but no, that's the joke, that everyone in prison is innocent. So at least for season 1 right now, I have an incredibly high bar. They are either vetted by the Innocence Project. They have had investigators, they've been covered enough where I've seen the evidence. And again, I go through case files, I look at this stuff, I talk to people, like the one that just came out this week. Bob Ruff had investigated this case for months. It was on his podcast. Bob Ruff with Truth and Justice, who does a lot with the West Memphis 3. As someone else, he investigated this case. There had been many investigations on this case. It's very obvious. The facts show this person is innocent. So that's the bar I'm setting with season 1. And I don't know if I told you guys this yet, because I just got this news, but one of the cases I was looking into covering, the investigator. So I'm actually going down in 2 weeks to meet with Jason Baldwin from the West Memphis 3. He has his own innocence organization, and I'm meeting with one of his private investigators, and so they're covering this case, and I figured, okay, this is great. Jason Baldwin's probably going to take this case. There's probably a very high bar for this person's innocence. I talked to their advocate. And then when they finally went there and started speaking to their alibi witnesses, it kind of started to unravel. And the investigator called me and said, this person might be innocent, but I would maybe stay away this season. Right now I would maybe stay away. So, that's the bar that I'm really talking to investigators and people like that. So, but that was fascinating. That was really sad too, because I spoke to him. And do I personally believe he's innocent? Yeah. But does that mean he's innocent? I don't know. Do I think he did enough time? Do I think 20 years is enough time? Yes. That's a whole other issue. That's the criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm. When you started doing this, did you expect to visit them in prison? Because you got interrupted by COVID, right?
Yeah, I did. I got to visit JJ, and that was literally like the day the COVID announcement for, all visitations stopping. Yeah. And I had 3 interviews lined up in Texas death row. They don't have phones. So I have to visit them in person, to do the interviews. And I don't see that happening anytime. So those are a lot of cases that are now getting pushed back, that, they're on death row. These are urgent stories that need to be told. And one of them I said, hey, you write me a lot of letters. Can I have a voice actor, say, verbatim what you tell me in these letters? And he said, I do not want a voice actor on my case. So, these are stories that we're pushing back. COVID's really interrupted a lot of this.
So did you consider how you would mentally prepare to interview somebody on death row? Because I can imagine that would be a bit trying.
Well, it's a learning experience. I am a nice person, and I did figure out with this one man who is who is a very salty is not the word, and there is no word to describe having 5 stays of execution and being on death row for 35 years.
I'd be pretty pissed too.
Yeah. And then, I'm just trying to help, and he had written me some letters. I guess I sent him a book of crossword puzzles and Sudoku, because I know that, just from reading Damien Eccles' stories, they just have books. So in one of my letters back to him, I just sent some of this. I love Sudoku. I do it all the time. And he wrote me back being like, don't patronize me. Like, I am a established lawyer. I don't need your silly Sudokus. And I was like, I'm learning. How do you talk to somebody on death row? What, that man is a particularly hardened person. He was an innocent man who the system has completely screwed him over. He was almost executed 5 times. Of course he's going to yell at me for sending a Sudoku. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so stupid. Like, how dare I,
That's interesting. Talking about how hardened he is, and he's been there, lined up to be executed 5 times.
Well, I think people forget that death row is also solitary confinement. He's been in solitary confinement for 35 years.
Right. So what if someone like that gets out? And I don't mean to be insulting by saying someone like that, but what if a person who has been in prison for so long and has had that boomerang of emotion, right? You're on death row, you're in solitary confinement. Oh, you're not. Oh, you're on death. You over and over and over. How does that person function when they get out into society?
Well, that's what I always say. I say when they get out, because I want to put that positive energy into the world. There's no programming in our system for people that are locked away for life. There is no kind of, half of these people I speak with, people who are on, who are doing life or on death row, a lot of them, depending on the state, can't even take classes or go to school, because they say, you're going to die here. We don't need to prepare you for anything. You're lesser than, you're whatever, we don't need to put resources into you. And then they get out. So I have another podcast coming out this fall, winter. It's a 6-part investigative or documentary series about a man who was expected to die in prison, and he's been released, and it's following his story. What does that look like to eat with a fork for the first time in 25 years? What's it like to shower on your own when you're not surrounded by people?
I mean, you're talking about the simplest things in life, and then it's that, and then it's how does it feel when you go to apply for a job and you have to answer that question, and then you have to explain yourself, and you have to all start from way behind everybody else before you can prove yourself. And we've been talking to Doreen Giuliano, who's John Juca's mother, and John Juca's been in prison for 19 years now.
It's 16. Yeah, this is a big New York case.
Mm-hmm.
Took place in Brooklyn, and there was a victim, Mark Fisher, and there is a killer in prison, and then John Juca is also in prison. And his mother, Doreen Quinn Giuliano, actually incredibly went undercover to befriend one of the jurors on her son's murder trial, which he was convicted in. And she knew that he knew John, and she befriended him as a different person and got a confession from him, got it taped, and brought it to the judge, and it still didn't work. They actually did what do they call, overrule his conviction at one point, and just
2018,
recently,
yeah,
and then it was reinstated in 2019, I believe. So yeah, it's been quite a wild ride for John Juka.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is even if he gets out, so the process that they go through is that it's overruled and he's up for another trial, but in the interim they keep him in Rikers. So he gets transferred from one prison to another prison, and in the interim he's kept in Rikers, and that's just a tactic so that, and they dangle it in front of him and say just plead guilty, we'll give it'll be time served, you'll get out. But he's got so much pride, and not pride because pride can sometimes have a negative connotation. He is so much will and so much like belief in himself that he won't, he'll continue the path of saying, I didn't do it, so why would I even say I did this? Why is that going to be on my record? But literally he's in fear for his life at Rikers. I mean, you don't even have to be a true crime fan to know that Rikers is probably in the top 5 of the worst prisons in the world.
Yeah, he was moved. He was moved back upstate.
Rikers is a jail.
Yeah, he was there when his conviction was overturned and before it got reinstated. So he was there for maybe like 8 months or a year or something like that.
So yeah, that's something I learned doing this. Prisons and jails are different. Rikers is horrible. I mean, a jail is meant to hold you for, it's a holding, it's where you go overnight, or, you're not supposed to be there for a long time. They are not sustainable for that. I mean, Khalif Browder, he was there for 3 years and killed himself. I mean, Rikers is a terrible place. So yeah, for Juka to be there for that long is also just, it's horrible.
He was saying that he had to tape books to himself, and just in case he was stabbed overnight, that it would at least be some protection.
Yeah, he saw people stabbed right in front of him. Yeah.
And that's the tactic that they use. I mean, there's no coincidence that they choose Rikers as the jail in which he's kept in the interim between.
Well, they could have given him bail. I mean, he at the point where his conviction was overturned, he was not a convicted murderer. He could have gotten bail.
Right. Well, I don't know if you guys followed Khalif Browder's story. He was only there for 3 years because he couldn't make bail. He couldn't make bail, and they kept him there for 3 years. I mean, the system is, I mean, I've stepped into a whole other world of like how disturbing our system is. Like when I was doing missing persons with you guys, like I know we had talked a bit about Jane and John Doe's and the different kinds of systems that NamUs and trying to find and identify somebody who's missing. I mean, that's a whole other mess. And then now I'm in this whole other mess of a world with bail and bond and appeals and going to the same judge who presided over your case and then appealing to them. It's a mess. Everything is a mess.
Yeah. No doubt about it. And yeah, Lance, to your point about trying to get John to just plead. We had spoken with Doreen, and she's in tears and saying, this is, that's really tough to even hear your son saying, I'm not going to do that, when she knows he could be out if he just did. And we're trying to tell her, like, look, John would be an amazing advocate. He can be a speaker. He can have a podcast, for God's sake, and be
not on
advocate.
The Obsessed Network.
Right. And try to make a living that way, if he's out as a convicted murderer.
That is like Jason Baldwin. They took the Alford plea. The West Memphis 3 took the Alford plea, so they were released and are allowed to say I'm innocent, but are technically convicted killers. And Jason started his own organization. It's called Proclaim Justice. I didn't say that before, but Jason's organization is Proclaim Justice, and he's now trying to help other innocent people. But I know we've talked about how I want to talk about John Juka's case with you guys.
Yeah, we got to put you in touch with Doreen Quinn Giuliano. You've got to hear her story about going undercover. It's absolutely incredible.
It's amazing the things that, and I know this happens in missing persons cases all the time. We have Alyssa Turney's sister, Sarah Turney, these families that do anything and everything to get their loved one back or find some kind of closure. And I hear so much of this too with families and spouses of those wrongfully convicted. I mean, I would like to think I'm that kind of person that would do that to you.
Well, I think you're on the right path. I really do. I think we had you on to talk about your show, and I think it's exactly the show that you need to do. It's exactly your show, and it's so important.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. And it's fantastic. So check it out at unjustandunsolved.com. Also available podcast players everywhere. Check us out too. Crawlspace-media.com. We've got a bunch of shows. We do Missing Maura Murray.
The Gossip Pod, right?
The Gossip Pod. You tune in on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Crawlspace has sort of a little mini spin-off called the Gossip Pod because we got branded that as sort of as a joke, or I guess
it was pretty accurate. We really picked up the baton and ran with that one.
Yeah, it was.
Some people might be
intended as an insult, but we took it as a compliment.
You have to.
Yeah. And so some people might be wondering why I have Applebee's in the background. It's because Maggie loves Applebee's. I don't know if people realize this, but she loves Applebee's. So
love it. I love that 20 pounds we gained in New Hampshire.
Yes. I check out the Disappearance of Maura Murray docu-series, 6-part docu-series that aired on the Oxygen Network. It is excellent, and we talk a little bit about our podcast in there, but you get to see Maggie, and we're in the show as well. But yeah, a lot of time spent in New Hampshire, a lot of time spent at the Applebee's in the White Mountains. And
I want to say, I know we talked a lot about like the dark side of that particular case, but I mean, there is a real family and there is a real missing person. And I think, you guys and myself would agree it's close. I mean, I feel like something's going to snap. So I thank you guys for doing, everything you can for that case and that family. And I think, the more people that do pay attention and know something can really help.
Yeah, I think so too. Really hope so.
Gosh, now you're making me hungry.
Right? Look at that.
Ooh.
All you can eat riblets, tenders, and shrimp.
Riblets, tenders, and shrimp. That's what I want. I gotta go get dinner.
All right, meet you at Applebee's.
See you at Applebee's.
Thank you so much to the Outlier Podcast Festival.
Yeah,
this was an absolute blast.
Thank you, Ever, for organizing this and for everybody who's watching. This is the first time we've done it, so hopefully everybody enjoyed it. And thank you so much.